welcome.
Thank you very much indeed. It's great to be back. I think we've both got slightly confused with the timing of the lady announcing the recording was happening there. But it's lovely to be back. Lovely to see you.
We've not chatted for a couple of months on this podcast.
No.
And last time when we were together, we were exploring what lockdown was feeling like, change curves, safety. We're now in 2.0 lockdown. We'll be coming out from a timing point of view next week into probably a tiered system, so still relative lockdowns. So now with reflection in mind, let's just dive straight in, William, if we can.
Sure.
With reflection in mind, what is your coach's mind and facilitator's mind starting to see? Because, we spend our life in the world of development. So it's all about how do people personally and professionally develop. So talk to me about your observations. What are you noticing this time round?
Well, not wishing to sound too miserable about it, this 2.0, to quote you, is different to 1.0, the original version of lockdown. And specifically, I think I'll talk from my position. I was very fortunate, and I think lots of my friends felt the same, very fortunate to have the light, the sun, and very lovely temperature conditions to kind of be in lockdown 1.0. This time it is different, and I know that the phrase is there's no such thing as bad weather, there's just wrong clothes, but it feels grayer, it feels wetter, colder, darker, because, surprise, surprise, as is the season, it's kind of autumn tipping into early winter. So I think it probably is actually winter now. So it does feel differently from that point of view. And for me, your question was about coach's mind. That requires different kind of tactics, strategies, and approaches, while still kind of using the muscle memory that I developed during lockdown 1.0. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
When you say there isn't bad weather, there's just wrong clothes, that is so a dog walker talking.
Well, both you and I have dogs, so we both kind of know that. Although I have to confess that Debbie has been really the very committed kind of, get the cagoule, the clothes and the walking stuff out. I've been a little bit more, I'm not venturing outside until it's March. But there we go, really. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it is very much that frame, I think, I would say. So,
you talk about muscle memory. I think this is an interesting one. And particularly, my background in sport as well, in providing that balance to how do you perform at the highest level, you create muscle memory. And whether you work in the military and you practice maneuvers, whether you work in sport and you practice what we call, orders of play, so that in a game situation, you don't have to rely on your anything other than instinct, because you're just acting out. How does muscle memory play a part then? We've been through the first lockdown. Are you suggesting we've got to kind of learn from what we learned to do last time and bring it into this one, or is this about learning new stuff and creating new muscle memory?
I think it's a bit of both. So if I think about the first lockdown, okay, which is I think one of the positives that came of that, and there were positives, so for example, less commuting time, better work-life balance, all of that kind of thing. There were positives. One of the main positives I found, and so were the people I did a lot of work with, was it forced your hand to have to find new ways of working. And you had to learn how to engage more fully and smartly with virtual technologies and platforms. So I found that quite interesting, because one of the benefits of the first lockdown was the learning of something new. Now, obviously, as a result of experimenting like we are right now, with podcasting, with running seminars, with workshops, with coaching, with all of those things, within a virtual context, we kind of developed some muscle there. But the essence of the muscle, I think, is the interesting thing, which is the learning of something new. So, for example, This is a micro example, and then I'm going to talk about something which I think is just applicable, which is so you said to me at the beginning of our conversation, you said, "Oh, you've changed offices," and it was just something new in terms of kind of going, "Okay, make this your space, make this your space, enjoy this space, create a space that works for you." So that was one thing which we did. My old office is now like a home gym because obviously we still want to go again with the fitness, and I find it harder at this time of year to keep going with that, even though that I know fundamentally doing some form of physical exercise, without a shadow of a doubt, there's numerous scientific studies it proves the point. But I thought about this thing about kind of doing something new. So, for example, I have signed up for a winter writing sanctuary piece. Yeah. Well, I mean, Debbie turned me onto it. She said, I found this thing, and I said, oh, that looks quite interesting. Can you send me the link? And so I started to do it. Now, I'm not doing it with a view to becoming a published author, kind of, and sort of, selling millions of copies of books. But I suddenly noticed that I hadn't done any writing. That's not true. I write reports, I write analysis documents, I write material to engage with people and audiences, but I haven't just written anything just for me, because I like writing and I like exploring the written word. And so, half the battle with all of these things is getting going. So I kind of delayed for a couple of days in terms of getting started, and then I just started to write. And I just noticed it was just lovely to do something creative, which was different and new to what I would normally do.
Yeah, there's a way of reconnecting with oneself, I think, when you do something like that. And perhaps that's a kind of refreshing element here, right? You start something new and there's this instant reconnection with the self. Because what I've observed is everyone is just bloody tired of this situation, right? Fatigue has set in. It's a bit like being at mile 22 of the marathon, or 34 kilometers if you're on the metric system. There's still 6K to go.
Yeah.
Probably another 45 minutes of running time. You've still got to put one foot in front of the other. And I think a lot of us are in that phase. Vaccines are being talked about this time next year. Who knows? But what I like about what you're saying is actually it's not just about trying something new. It's actually about consistently doing something to create the muscle memory. What have you noticed from a muscle memory point of view, like for yourself? How is it enhancing? How is it changing how you look at things, maybe?
Okay, so a couple of things, and I think you're right there, which is, look, it's like a series of modules, this particular winter writing sanctuary. It's a series of modules. So you don't just kind of do one and kind of go, okay, that's it, I've done now. Right. You kind of have a kind of a thing which they call a kind of a spark, which is less like a video of the person who is the kindly hosting it, talking about her experience of being an actual writer, what it means to be a writer. She reads something from books which have inspired her about writing. But then you have an exercise. So you have an exercise to do on a daily basis. So I'm currently on my kind of third bit of writing. And I don't know whether it's getting better or not. But what's really refreshing is that there's no pressure because it doesn't matter. You're just doing it for yourself and having a go. And yesterday you mentioned about sort of the dog walker's adage of no such thing as bad weather, just warm clothes, right? So it said, right, this piece of writing today is to do with writing this from a position of being an animal.
Excellent.
So I wrote it from a position of being my smallest dog, Betty. So I wrote it from a position of being Betty. And what was lovely is, I don't know, I'd probably read it in like 6 months' time and kind of go, wow, that's really quite rubbish in terms of written. But what was lovely is trying to engage it and try to imagine the world through her eyes. And something which I took from that is that I think that dogs particularly, I don't know about cats, I've never been around cats much, but dogs are very real time. So, if they can't get one thing, then they kind of go, okay, well, never mind, I'll just go off and do that thing. Or, is it food time yet? No, okay, I can wait. They're just they're very good at being. So I noticed when I was writing it, the thought that occurred to me is I should really be a bit more like Betty at points in my own life.
There's no question we could learn from dogs. I've always felt that, when you see two dogs meet each other in the park, I'm not suggesting that as human beings we should sniff each other's.
No, it's a good suggestion. That's good you clarified that now.
Yeah, but when they do sniff, they make an instant judgment, don't they, as to whether or not they want to play.
Yeah.
And if they don't want to play, they might kind of jump around each other, then they might snarl, and they'll go off in their separate directions.
Yeah.
What's amazing is that dog never... And I remember when I had my old Labrador, Amber, and we'd go to Hampstead Heath for a walk. She wasn't the most sociable of dogs, but she'd come across a dog, and sometimes she would just play really beautifully. And they would roll around and jump and fight and play nice. And other times she'd meet dogs and there'd be this snarling and both dogs would beard each other, as the owner.
Yeah.
But when we got home, she wouldn't be sat there on the floor like, what me? She was completely in the moment, because I'm absolutely positive that in most dogs' heads, it's all about the moment. It's sticks.
Yeah.
Sticks. I mean, literally every time I stand up in my house, my Springer Spaniel thinks he's going out for a walk.
Yeah, exactly.
He is on point. Literally, I get up from the bed to go and grab a glass of water halfway through it's 10 o'clock at night. He's up and he's at the back door. I'm ready. I am ready. He's so keen. And then, of course, I just get the glass of water and go and sit down again, and he kind of wanders back, huffs and puffs, sits down, and then I get up a few minutes later and I'm ready.
Yeah, exactly. Is it now? Are we doing this now? But even the huffing and the puffing is just so minimal. It's a bit like, okay, it's not now. But then literally, as you say, like 30 seconds later, you're off. And I love your example with Amber, because I think that sometimes if things don't go my way or a person's way, it's very easy to kind of scheme and kind of, what are you going to do the next time you see that dog, Amber? Yeah, there's none of that. There's none of that stuff. It's just like sort of, okay, yeah, right. Have you got any biscuits? It's a bit like that. So,
and the next time she bumps into that dog, they still sniff each other out. They don't judge each other on the last time they met. Whereas you and I might be sat in the car going, oh, do you remember last time we came to these people? So-and-so was really rude. We hold on to things, and it teaches us to let go. But to your point, it creates, in that exercise, you are forced to be more empathic. You're forced to look at things from a different perspective, which I think can really help create good, solid, new muscle memory with regards to the learning.
Definitely.
When it comes to this trying new things, you've just shared that lovely example. What else are you seeing that people could be trying? I'm seeing a level of fatigue where, at the beginning there was lots of trying new things, writing books, musical instruments, learning new languages. That's all faded now. It turns out we don't all have a book in us.
Yes, exactly. Hey, I probably don't either. I'm just enjoying the process and the journey of writing.
But you might, because you might have, after your 10 modules, you might have 10 chapters to a book on unlocking creativity within.
Who knows?
But maybe it's the link to creativity, and I wonder, is there space for people right now to maybe tap into their more creative side? When you talked before about we've all learnt new ways of doing things, running workshops, attending meetings, doing business. Maybe creativity is one of the positives that comes out of this period.
I think so. And you know what? Look, creativity is a very relative thing. So for some people, creativity will be doing the kind of activity that I'm talking about with you in terms of writing. For other people, creativity could be to do with having a little bit of a rearrange in terms of a room, which is a job that they've been meaning to get around to, but they've been putting off because they've been too whatever. I think the nice thing about creativity, it doesn't have to be a particular thing. It could be anything for you, because things are all relative.
Right. Which explains why I moved my office around now that it's winter, so I get a bit more light in the. I mean, it sounds like it's a big office. It's not, but I've moved it around so
Yes.
that I have a different perspective. I'm looking at different things. I've got more light coming in during the day, and I hear you, and I see that as being, even just changing furniture around in your house
Yes.
could be something that gives you just that different perspective and just freshens things up.
Spot on, and that's the thing for me. I think it's about that different perspective. So you said just a moment ago about seeing different things. I'm probably seeing things in different ways, because it's not like you got different things in your office. You got the same things, but suddenly you might look at them occasionally differently. You might look at something differently. So I think this thing around creativity, there's a sense of just, it doesn't really matter what it is. It doesn't matter how long you do it, but just trying something new. Just to mix it up a little bit. I mean, look, don't get me wrong. As you know, I'm a big fan of routine, and I'm a big fan of discipline. I'm also a big fan of not letting it become too much like Groundhog Day, which is very easy to do in this life and existence that we're currently in.
And I know people that when they talk about creativity, they talk about it as a process. You don't actually have to produce some final big thing. It's enjoying the process
Yes.
of doing something.
Yes.
Which is more important.
Absolutely. That could be as easy as, for example, somebody who I coached a while back, we were talking about how much space and permission we give ourselves just to sit and just to reflect on what's been working, what's been tougher in the week, and what are you learning, and what would you like to focus on next. So that's just literally sort of a form of reflection, maybe even tipping into a form of meditation, just in terms of just having some being time. It doesn't have to be a large amount of time. Could be, 15 minutes, 3 sets of questions. Boom.
Yeah. And it's actually that you talk about discipline, and maybe it is that discipline. I sense that most people don't book time with themselves, William.
Yeah, I don't. I'm poor at it. I have to consciously kind of go, right, that time on Friday, because Friday's a better day for me for that kind of activity. I'll do some of that. So, and sometimes I follow through on it. And if I'm honest with everybody, sometimes I don't. And I think that what is very important, particularly at this time, given what we're all going through, is if I don't give myself a hard time about it. It's a bit like the writing piece, which is, I don't want to kind of create a kind of, I must get that done by this point. Just, enjoy it for what it is. If you want to stop and come back to it, that's fine. There's some flexibility, but I am a big believer, which I think particularly at the moment, it's nice just to try something new. I mean, it could be cooking a dish that you've never cooked before.
Right.
With
the pure awareness that if it tastes like, you don't eat it, and you can eat tomorrow.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And also, look, let's be honest. If you can follow a recipe book and sort of you have the right ingredients, you're okay. And unless it's something like on Friends with Louie and Rachel, there's 2 pages stuck together and she made a beef trifle. That's probably not going to be your best work. Although Joey did like it, and he had a point. Hey,
Good friends tap there. I like that. A show that absolutely threw caution to the wind in its lack of multiculturalism.
True. there is that, which is also valid.
But it's still funny today, right? I watched an episode just yesterday, and I'm still laughing. And do you know what's really interesting about that show? It was just the generation before mobile phones took over. It was pre-smartphone.
Yes, good point. Yeah.
You don't have anybody walking around texting or Googling
True.
or checking things, right? They would phone people. It was all phone messages, voice messages. The most famous scene right at the end of the show when Ross and Rachel are going to get together. Half of that scene is played out around a portable voice recording machine. That's how old-fashioned it is. And yet it's still funny today. So I love your reference to friends there.
I do think that. I think that with the cooking thing, that's quite interesting. Just making something. That if you think about the word creativity, that is kind of what the essence of it is. It doesn't really matter what you're making, but just making something.
I want it to taste nice. But I hear you.
Yeah, sure.
I hear you, because actually that's where I think for my creativity is definitely where one of the areas where I express creativity is when I go into a kitchen. I find it quite cathartic. I don't want anyone in my space. I move around at my own point, listening to my music or a podcast, and I'm creating something that I'm going to trust will be edible. But I want to go back to this point about making time for ourselves, because I think one of the challenges that people feel is, they're not working from home anymore. They're actually sleeping in their offices. And this kind of concept of, work from home has become sleeping in the office. For some people, actually, the bedroom is their office. And so to make time for ourselves when we're with ourselves all the time, I think becomes a critical piece for work-life balance or life-work balance, depending on your order, and just for this mental health that you talk about. Why do you think it's so difficult for us to prioritize that? By your own admission, there are times when, although you don't beat yourself up on it, you set a time aside and something obviously prioritizes above it. What drives that kind of behavior?
That's a good question. What drives that behavior? I think there's a few things for me, which is if I don't feel like doing it, is one big thing. I also have a tendency to procrastinate, so I will put it off, which is kind of along the same continuum. And also, if I'm honest, if nothing comes through when I'm reflecting, so if I ask myself a question and nothing comes through, it's so easy for me just to kind of go, okay, well, there's nothing there, don't bother. Rather than sitting there and the kind of going, oh, that's interesting, there's nothing coming through. And forcing you, it's almost like that gratitude exercise whereby you think about things which you appreciate and feel grateful for. And, you kind of sit when it's kind of like grey and a bit wet and kind of going, nothing's coming through. But there's loads of things if you sit with it, there's loads of things which occur to me quite easily, which I'm grateful for.
And I think it's about making that time. I know since the summer, I've blocked out from 2:00 every Friday my diary. And it's every Friday, 2:00, I stop. And I don't feel guilty about it. And I go for a nice walk. And in the summer months, I would go out, with Emma, and we go for a lovely walk. We take some wine, take the dogs, and it would be, a
beautiful
nice weekend in. The weather doesn't invite us to do that now, and I'll take the dogs out myself. But actually, I can go for a slightly longer walk, and I don't mind the rain or the wind or the cold or the dark. And I just find myself entering the weekend in a slightly more relaxed state. And it's making that time where it's, almost religiously disciplined. 2:00 on Friday, maybe it creeps to 2:30, but never beyond it. And I have a physical diary as well as an online diary. And the online diary is completely blacked out from 2:00 onwards, so no meetings. And in the physical diary, I actually, draw a line at 2 p.m. every Friday and put, a great big cross there so that nothing goes in. And actually, it's quite liberating. And I wonder if, for some people, they're working actually much harder. They're working longer hours. They're totally driven by the fact they still got to produce results, but they're working from home with maybe even young families. To make that time, the benefit of making that time to reflect, or just not even reflect, perhaps just be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Watch a box set on Netflix or Amazon, whatever it is, whichever platform you subscribe to.
There are other platforms available, Brad. So but yeah, I think you're right. Which is, look, it doesn't have to be reflection, but it's just something for you. And also, it's interesting, which is, I don't think it has to be a large amount of time. And maybe there's momentum whereby, people talk about the idea of baby steps. So maybe that applies also with that whole process of reflecting. Maybe people just take a small amount of time and go from there. And then maybe they start with 15. Maybe they look to extend it to 25 or 20, and you kind of build it from there. I do think, though, you're right, which is, I think that the temptation to not have a hard stop and kind of go, I'm stopping now, and tools down, I'm doing something else. I think that the temptation just to continue without even being aware that you are, because you're at home, so what's the harm anyway? That happens.
I know my mum's started cycling. They got an exercise bike at home.
Yeah.
And she started cycling a couple of minutes a day, up to 3 minutes, 4 minutes, up to 15 minutes. And she's liking it so much, she's now doing like an online exercise class a couple of times a week. And she's there with her cans of baked beans, doing her lifts.
Yeah, brilliant.
And to your point, it's something new. It's creating muscle memory. It's giving her time for herself. It's mixing it up a little bit. And one of the things I'm taking from this conversation is that need during fatigue-based environments, which is what we're living through, to mix things up, whether it's changing your furniture around or adopting a new behaviour or trying something really creative, say like your writing sanctuary. When you look forward, William, maybe this brings us full circle on this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
When you look forward, what's your kind of hope of what we take away from this strange year?
That's a good question. And I'm going to answer it in this way, which is, for me, and this is for everybody, because some people like to look forward. For me, I'm trying to stop futuring so much. So I'll do a little bit of that. But I think a little bit like you said at the very beginning of our conversation, you gave the example of a marathon when you've still got X miles or X kilometers left. And then you said you work, and I've done the same thing on the one occasion when I ran the Great North Run. Oh. When I got to that, I got the sign which said, there was a sign which says, "Well done, you're halfway there," and the intention was to motivate you.
Yeah, and you're like, oh my God, the same again.
And it had the completely adverse effect for me. I was like, you got to be kidding! I'm already knackered, and I've got to do all that again within the space of being physically tired. But then also what kicks in is you just kind of go, just put one step in front of the other, one step in front of the other, one step in front of the other, as you yourself said. So I think for me, I'm kind of very wary at the moment because there are so many variables and unknowns. I'm very wary about thinking about, well, what could the future look like? What might the future be? Because none of us know. None of us know. So I'm trying to be more dog in terms of kind of going, don't think about the walk in a weekend's time. Think about what's happening now. Think about what sofa do you want to sit in and enjoy fully.
But I think one, that's going to be the title of our podcast episode today. Be more Betty. I think that's definitely the title. And there is a fundamental difference between running the Great North Run, which is a 20k 14-mile run, and where we're in right now, because at least you knew you still had an hour of running left.
Yes.
In the world we're living in today, it's so uncertain. There is no end date.
Exactly.
So like in that moment when you're not feeling motivated, you need resilience to dig deep and, like you said, one foot in front of the other. That Natalia Cohen, the rower across the Pacific, last week, she spent 4 days rowing at one point, and they went backwards.
Wow.
Because of the current.
Wow.
And she had this mantra, one stroke at a time.
Perfect.
Right?
Perfect.
She got through 9 months on the Pacific with one stroke at a time, 1 hour at a time.
Incredible.
1 day, 1 week,
yeah.
1 month. And then finally they arrived in Australia and a nice beer and a pizza. But that idea
as you do.
Of one stroke at a time,
yes,
I think is really important because we don't have an end in sight. We don't know how that's going to be. And you reminded me of a story. I used to run ultras because I love running. And I remember doing this 100k race, and that's 10 hours of running. And I got to every 5k they give you a sign. So at the beginning you're noticing them, and then after about 40 or 50k you stop noticing them because your body's tired. It literally is one thing. And I arrived at the bottom of this hill, and I'm like,
oh no.
I've been going a long time, right? When I got to the top of the hill, there was a sign, a little gate sign.
Yeah.
90 kilometers. And I'm like, really? Really? You put that in there? I literally had to drag my whole leg up one by one, crawling up the hill because I'm so exhausted. I'm down to juice bars and juice packs and complex carbohydrate solutions to try and just. And I've now got to contend with the fact that there's still an hour left of running.
Brutal. I mean, look, I guess on the upside, I mean, that's a proper run. I mean, with the Great North Run, there's also something else which I think is important not to underestimate, which is the importance of having people who are there to support you and cheer you on and help you. So the Great North Run, I mean, people come out and really do support you. I think it's even harder at this time because obviously people being in groups, that's not a happening thing. So I think that therefore managing oneself through it in one's own mind becomes even more important to invest in and get some moves on. I remember thinking, hearing you talk about doing the ultras and the 100k, by the way, magnificent. I climbed Kilimanjaro, and towards the end, when we were climbing Kilimanjaro there, because there's 3 peaks, so you got the last peak, which everyone wants to kind of sort of arrive at. And I was just doing anything I could. So one foot in front of the other was 1, which I did for a while. But then I counted 1 to 10. Then I counted 10 to 1. Then I counted 1 to 5. Then I you just kind of have various things just to keep you on course and moving in the right direction. Yeah. And that's a big thing, I think.
And I think that's the mental fortitude and strength we need. And perhaps it's taking those quiet moments to reflect where you create those coping mechanisms that help push you through. William, I love this. I think we've come full circle. We started with sort of muscle memory and we end with how to create a little bit more of it. So thank you for coming on again. We'll get you back, no doubt. And next time, maybe we'll talk about what it's like to live like a cat.
You might have to do most of the talking on that one, I'm afraid, Brad. I have no frame of reference for it. I mean, it's been wonderful. I love that. It has been wonderful to see you and speak with you. Thoroughly enjoyable. So thank you.
That just fell off my computer. Those are my 2 cats who aren't with us anymore. But
I think the cats were listening probably and kind of going, "Don't forget us."
Very 90s cats though, William, because they were called Mulder and Scully.
Which is Mulder and Scully, probably very in vogue right now, I would imagine, in the 90s, isn't it? I think again, things come full circle.
Right, see, I love that. William Galton, coach extraordinaire. I had more feedback positively about you the other day when I met with the team.
Oh, wonderful.
About you, yeah. So always lovely to see you two. We'll do this again.
Superb. I look forward to it. Take care. Stay well. Stay safe, my friend.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.